This podcast episode with Sarah is one of the most powerful stories of trauma, resiliency, courage, vulnerability, and healing that has ever been shared with me. And over the years, I've been privy to hundreds of stories of traumatic birth and healing. I feel it's important to forewarn my podcast listeners of what will be for many hugely confronting topics that we discuss in this episode, including rape and sexual abuse, suicide, cancer, early pregnancy loss, extreme postnatal depression, suicidal ideation, a near-death experience of early postpartum septicaemia, and complex PTSD. Please take a moment to tune into your mind, heart, and body to ascertain whether you're in an okay space to be taking in this conversation right now. If not, honour your current needs and come back to this episode if and when you feel ready to do so. Should you decide to listen and find that the themes trigger your own trauma responses, please contact a trusted friend, therapist, or local support service to garner the help that you're needing. Sarah is a mum to 2 children, aged 2 and 4. She is a survivor of adolescent sexual abuse and cancer, as well as having dealt with the trauma of losing both her parents by 13 years of age. In this podcast episode, she talks through the coping strategies she adopted, including fawning, numbing, and dissociation, and how these impacted her birth and postpartum experiences. Sarah wants to share her story so that others won't feel so alone in their traumatic experiences of new parenthood. In her sharing, she offers guidance, hope, and inspiration to those who may be feeling a sense of hopelessness surrounding the hardships that life, birth, and new parenthood can sometimes bring. She is an absolute heroine and is courageous beyond measure.
But I was doing some notes yesterday because, I was like, oh man, Emma's birth, like my first birth. I was like, I haven't really thought about that for a long time. And I was just jotting down some things and I was like, oh my gosh, like all that happened. You know
Wow.
how sometimes like I've done lots of reflection with Alexa before I had my birth with Hugo.
Mm-hmm.
But even reflecting on it again now, I can see even more. It's that whole thing, you don't cross the same river twice. So like
Yeah.
every year as a parent, I reflect and I get even more insight into what was happening, which is such a gift. But honestly, I feel so proud of myself today because reading through that, when you tell it so close together, you think, I have no idea how I got through it. I just actually don't know. And I'm just so proud of myself. So yeah, I feel good.
You know what, Sarah, I just think that's the most beautiful way to start the episode. You
Oh!
how proud you are of yourself and that this came from having, this podcast episode coming up and you reflecting on all that you have been through and seeing how far you've come.
Yeah.
So let's just keep rolling. Let's just get into it straight from
Okay.
here. And
All right.
and I'm going to kind of let you lead the way a bit in terms of start us off from wherever feels most relevant to you.
Okay. There's so many, it's hard because there's so many places that I could start. And I want to make sure I'm giving the people the right context to kind of understand the whole story. But I also don't want to go through my whole life story either.
Yeah.
So I think where I might start is giving a little bit of context around what kind of mindset I was in before I got pregnant with Emma.
Perfect.
I think is
Perfect.
probably the best, is the best. So before I got pregnant with Emma, I was building my first business, my first pole dancing studio. And yeah, yeah, so all about woman empowerment. And my biggest goal with that studio was to create a space that people felt safe to express themselves in. That was the whole gig. So I was
Wow.
really, really, really passionate about that. And I still am, actually, 10 years later. And so my husband Jack, so we got married and then we went on our honeymoon and we got pregnant on our honeymoon, which was really exciting. And then about maybe 6 weeks after we conceived, I started bleeding. And that was quite scary for me because we had decided that we were going to start trying, and I have polycystic ovaries. So, there's all these factors that kind of come in to be like, oh, you're not going to get pregnant naturally. So I was like, oh no. I went to my doctor and she was like, oh yeah, look like you've miscarried. We'll do a blood test kind of thing. Da, da, da. I was like, okay, that's okay. I wasn't really expecting it to happen first time anyway. That's all right. And then when I say I was really into my businesses, I was like, so in. I was like a workaholic, honestly. Like I had the most insane work ethic, which actually comes back to a lot of my trauma that I had like as a child, but we won't go too much into that. Coming back, um, I was like, it would have been about 4 weeks later. I was having really sore tummies, and I kind of just ignored that because my body always had weird pains and I was always doing lots of training for competitions. And my mindset at that time was just, we push through, like we do whatever we need to do to get whatever we need to do done. And so I was teaching this class. I was teaching this class, and Jack rings me, my husband, and he's like, the doctor's at our house. It's like 7 p.m. at night. And I was like, like my GP? And he's like, yeah, apparently she's been trying to get hold of you. She hasn't been able to get hold of you. You have to get to the hospital right now. Should we send an ambulance? And I was like, oh no, like, no, I'm in the middle of teaching a class. And I also had a really important meeting after my class that I wanted to go to. So yeah, this just shows you like where my mind was at, right? I was like, oh, maybe I could just have the meeting like at the hospital. And I was like, why do I have to go to the hospital? Like, this is like crazy. And like, oh, you've got your blood markers or whatever showing that you've got an ectopic pregnancy. I was like, what's an ectopic pregnancy? I have no idea. And basically, how they explained it to me was like, I still had a pregnancy, but it was in the wrong place in my stomach. So it was still in the ovary, I think, or like stuck in the fallopian tube. Now, this was my 30th birthday, and all my friends had flown out from different parts of the country and Australia to come to my birthday. Um, but I was in hospital. So had the surgery, and recovered from that surgery. And I was a little bit upset after that, but it was okay. Like I knew I was going to try again. And to be honest, that surgery was really hard for me to recover from, just because I don't know, I think I was under for a really long time and I was just really sick afterwards. So had that ectopic pregnancy, thought, no worries, we'll try again. And then that was in August, and then of March the next year, so not that far past, I was pregnant again.
Mm-hmm.
And I just opened my second studio. So I'd left my first baby studio, had this brand new studio. And you'll know if you have a business, that's in its infancy, it's like all go. And we overcame so many roadblocks in building that business as well. So I was a little bit stressed out, but was pregnant anyway. And then I was so nervous that this pregnancy was also going to be an ectopic pregnancy. So that first, until that first scan, oh my gosh, I was just such a mess. But turns out it wasn't ectopic. So that was great. Had a great pregnancy with Emma. Was a little bit sick, but nothing crazy. I taught and danced all the way up to 38 weeks, like 38 and a half weeks, which I do not recommend if anyone's listening. Don't, like, just stop.
why don't you recommend that? I know you're laughing about it, but I'm sure there's some seriousness to what you're saying as well.
Because I just pushed my body too hard. And then by the time the birth came, I was just exhausted. I was really exhausted and I didn't have my reserves around me. And also being that focused on my business and doing that much exercise didn't let me kind of relax into it, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense, and as well, it doesn't really afford you the opportunity to tune in to your body and your baby and really like listen to the messages that are coming through, really connect with yourself and your baby in the lead up to the ultimate and the need for connection, which is during that birthing process and and the massive learning curve you go on after baby's born.
Yeah, totally. So that point in my life, I was really in this space of I can manifest it, I can make it happen, right? And so I did the hypnobirthing course, which was great. And I took it as, okay, if I just do, these meditations and these exercises, I'll be able to do them in the birth and I'll be fine. So I had complete 100% confidence that I would be able to deliver Emma vaginally, and we booked into a birth unit, birth center. What was it called? Birth care. If I just do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, it will equal an easy birth that I can just handle. And I was like, I have a really high pain tolerance, so it'll be fine. A couple of weeks before I was going to give birth to Emma, I was listening to this podcast, and it was from this lady who was, and I can't remember her name and I feel so bad, but she's like an incredible surfer and she got attacked by a shark and she lost her arm. She's like a world champion. She's one of the most inspiring women. I can't believe I can't remember her name. But the interviewer asked her, what was more painful, getting attacked by a shark or giving birth? And this lady, not skipping a beat, was like, giving birth. And I was like, no way. I was like, nope, I'm not going to let that in. Like, that is not going to be my reality. But when you don't know, you just don't know.
Yes.
When you don't know, you don't know. Anyway, so
Is that Bethany Hamilton?
What's that? Sorry? Is
that Bethany Hamilton?
Yes, it is her. Yep. Bethany Hamilton. Yeah. Yeah. Just amazing. Just before I get into my birth story about Emma, one of the really important things that I think is important to note as we're listening to this story is that, how before you said it was really important to take time to connect with your body and all of that kind of stuff. So from my sexual abuse, one of the coping mechanisms that I had developed was to shut down everything in my body. And, when you think of sexual abuse, you think, oh yeah, well, you'll shut it down like when you're having sex or in the bedroom, like that makes sense. But it actually carries on into the rest of your entire life. So I think even if I had taken the time to try and connect with my body, I kind of didn't know how to do it. And I know that sounds really strange, but
Not at all.
Just having this kind of, when anything gets hard or when anything gets vulnerable, having this, it's almost like a dissociation, but you can still be in the world. It's one of those things. It's trying to it's like trying to explain birth. It's just like a really weird feeling.
I appreciate you having a go at describing that though, because this is a really normal and helpful approach, right, to surviving untenable things when we're put in situations where we feel overwhelmed and completely helpless and hopeless and situations we can't escape. Our primal brain will give us the means to be able to survive really, really full-on traumas. And this is one of them, is that dissociation, is that disconnection with our bodies, so that in a sense we are not having to be in our bodies and continue to tolerate the pain or the you know, the suffering that's being inflicted upon us. But then what happens is that, you know, if that isn't healed to a degree where you've learned, where your body has learned how to respond and to safe situations that appear like they could be the unsafe situations, in ways that are helpful, then it will keep seeing any kind of these triggers, any things that resemble that initial experience as threats to your life, and it will throw you back into your coping strategies, right? So in your case, it sounds like it's a sort of a numbing of your body, a disconnection from your body. So yes, 100% makes sense that you wouldn't have even known how to connect with your body. And yeah, and I think even people who are listening who haven't got a history of, you know, sexual abuse, or who can't really relate to numbing or dissociation that you're describing, there's still a lot of people out there who are going, what do you mean by connecting in with your body and connecting with your... Because it's something that's kind of been conditioned out of us since day dot. We're not really encouraged to listen to our body wisdom. Yeah.
No, we are not. No. I come from a really intense sporting background too, so you know, you really learn how to shut things down.
Yes. And can I just ask, what had you done any specific therapies or work to try and heal it all from your sexual abuse before you got pregnant or during your pregnancy, or... Really?
So here's the thing about this, is that and this is going to sound really weird, but I think people who have had a lot of sexual abuse might be able to understand this. I didn't know that I'd been sexually abused until I had Emma in my arms at the end of our birth. Having Emma re-triggered all of these memories that I had.
So you completely shut them off. You had no memory of the abuse until it was reignited once you had your daughter in your arms.
So there was pieces that I'd completely suppressed that I didn't, have no memory of. And there were pieces of the abuse that I thought were completely normal that were absolutely not normal.
Okay. Yeah.
And I also didn't know, and you know, of course you don't know what you don't know, but I just remember holding Emma at the end and having all of these feelings like, oh my gosh, I just birthed a baby girl, how, like, this is amazing, but also being like, oh my God, like I have been so, you know, just like this clarity. But I also believe that when we go through the process of giving birth to our babies, we get downloads of things that we need to know in order to parent those babies. And that was the download that I needed to be able to parent my daughter. And my daughter now is the most strong-willed, outgoing, like beautiful, stunning. But man, she's going to get into like a lot of trouble. So we need to know that. The other part of the sexual abuse that I want to touch on, so there's the disassociation part, but there's also the coping mechanism I had, or I actually still have this, and I think I'll be working on it for a long time, of fawning. So you know how there's fight, flight, freeze, and then there's fawn. So fawn is being overly attentive and overcompensating to people around us, and being really hyper vigilant of how everybody is feeling and managing the room to make sure that you are safe in that room.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes that can literally look like being really lovely to the person in the birth space who's abusing you, and saying yes, and when you want to say no, and all those sorts of things. It's kind of being really appeasing, polite, accommodating, that sort of thing.
yeah, exactly. And so going into the context of birth, this is a really big, it's a really big problem. So at my studio, I was really lucky to have, you know, there was birth workers, there was plunket nurses and midwives, and you know, and so you get to know your students. It's one of the things I love so much about my job. But of course, because we created such a safe space, a lot of these birth workers would complain about, you know, people messaging them all the time, and like, you know, them just feeling overworked, and they're not getting enough sleep, and they're not feeling supported enough. And in that moment, I decided, okay, when I'm going to have Emma, I'm not going to annoy my midwife at all. When I'm having Emma, I am not going to be annoying. I'm not going to make too much noise. I'm not going to call the midwife too early. I just wanted to be like almost the best mum from the beginning, even during the birth, according to the midwives. And that makes it tricky. That makes it real tricky.
Absolutely.
That makes it real tricky.
We need the midwife's role to be looking out for your needs, so that you can surrender to the power of birth, so you can surrender to your process, rather than being in your head and trying to control the situation so that you're not upsetting the midwife or the doula, or you know, having to think about, you know, is it too soon to be ringing her? That's all counterproductive to your birthing process and to the role that the midwife necessarily needs to play.
Absolutely.
But I can totally see what you're doing here. It's that fawning behavior at play
all the way through. And so when you develop a relationship with your midwife, you know, if you're putting forward that fawning all the time, they just think that's who you are. And I also want to touch on that this is not like it's not a conscious decision. It's almost like a reaction. It's like how you make yourself feel safe, and especially when you're feeling vulnerable. And I really don't think there's anything more vulnerable than giving birth. Like it is a very vulnerable thing. So so birth with Emma. So my goodness. I've written down some dates because I was like, man, it's you know, a little while ago. So what I thought were contractions started with Emma on a Friday night, actually at our Christmas party that we were having for the studios. And then we'd hired out this big, like, fancy house, so we could all stay overnight and, you know, have like a really good time. And I remember just being at this Christmas party and just being in so much pain, but having to put on this smiley, amazing face because I was the boss, and that was my role. And I would just kind of come into the room that I was sleeping in that night and just be on the bed and be like, oh my gosh, I can't do this, can't do it. And then I'd like pick myself back up and go out there and be like, oh my goodness. So right, this is crazy. I understand that this is insane, but this is how sexual abuse can like impact us. So that was on the Friday night, and that kind of went through all Friday night. Saturday came, sun came up. I felt fine. Everything stopped. I was like, this is all good, no worries. And I also knew that there was a phenomenon of, you know, you kind of go into labor at night and then it can be fine during the day. And I was like, that makes sense. So wasn't too worried about that. The same happened on Saturday night, was in the shower, like, oh, so uncomfortable. Surely it must be tonight. No. Went through Saturday, fine. My sister had flown up from Dunedin. And so I was like, yeah, come out. I'm probably going to give birth tomorrow. Like, it'll be fine. no. Sunday, exactly the same thing. Just my husband is like, what is going on? And by this time, it's the third day. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I'm a person who really loves my sleep. And I just thought, oh my gosh, like how? Monday comes and the contractions start a little bit earlier. So generally they were starting like when the sun went down about 8 o'clock, but it started at like 3 kind of PM. And I was like, okay, like this is it. And so I'm writing out, like they feel like actual, notice I say they feel like actual contractions, and I'm writing them out on the Swiss ball. We're in a like tiny 1-bedroom apartment. It's the middle of summer. It's super hot. Jack starts timing them, and you know, they're quite far apart. And I'm like, but they feel, you know, they feel so intense. So we go through the entire night of doing that. And in the morning, I was like, okay, it's been like 4 days of this. Like, I was like, we're going to ring the midwife now. I was like, okay, I feel like we're close enough that I can ring the midwife. The midwife comes in and she's like, oh, you're about like 1 to 2 centimeters dilated. This is like 8 o'clock in the morning. She's like, it's not time to come into the birth care yet. And I just thought, oh, you know, like I've failed. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That overwhelming sense of like, I wanted to be the best birther and I'm not. Like I'm not even at the big, it sounds like I'm hardly even at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really like in my mind, I just felt like, oh, like that was the first time I thought, I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd read and listened to so many podcasts and, you know, just like I was so into all of that. And I'd heard that when you think, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore, that's when the baby comes. So I was like, okay, like this baby's gonna come out. So I continue writing through like the contractions, and Jack's with me, and he because he is like an athlete as well, and was at that time. And the contractions, we were counting them out together, like reps, like 1, 2, you know, just completely the wrong energy. um, and then about maybe like 5 o'clock of that Monday or Tuesday, I can't remember where we're up to, but we went into birth care because I was like, I'm done being here in this room, because it was just, I needed a different like space, a safer kind of space. So we went in there. It was about 8ish o'clock. It was beautiful in there. And then of course, they switch midwives over. Now, remember before when I was talking about how it's really important for me to, like, from the abuse, I'm always scanning the room and I'm always making sure everyone else is okay. So one of the things that comes with that is I can read people's micro expressions really, really well. And it's been a real superpower for business building and all of that kind of stuff, but not here. And so I could tell Jack was getting a little bit tired, and I could tell my midwife was like, oh, you know, you're not really progressing, you know, that kind of, and that just made it so much worse. That made it so much worse. And so they swapped midwives. The other midwife came and she checked me again, and she's like, oh, you're only about 3 centimeters dilated. And that was at like 8 o'clock at night. And then she said, what we can do, right, is we can break your waters, because my waters hadn't broken yet. And I was like, yep, cool. I didn't actually want my waters broken. Like I really didn't. Like I really, really didn't. But I didn't know how else to make the birth go faster so that everyone could go home and get enough sleep. Like that's where I was at. So they broke my waters, and she kind of reached up to feel Emma's head. And I just have never been in so much pain in my whole life, because I think she just kind of like donked down, you know, into my cervix. Never been in so much pain. And I just screamed and screamed and looked at Jack's face, and he was, you know, he was like, what the hell is this? And then that even further, I was like, oh, like, this is just the worst. And then she wasn't quite in the right position. So we did the rebozo, which also just hurt me so much. And then I was like, I have to go to hospital. I can't. Before this, I was so against going to hospital. I did not want to go to hospital. I did not want to have the cascade of intervention. I did not want to have to deal with more people, but that's how much pain I was in. I just couldn't relax. Went home, got in the car, and Jack, he turned the wrong way. So I don't know if you know Auckland Hospital and the birth center. They're like kind of across the road from each other, and you can kind of turn right straight to the hospital, or you can turn left, which takes you around all that, is it Dominion Park? I can't remember the name of the park, but it's like speed bumps. It's speed bumps. And we're driving around these speed bumps for like 5 minutes. It feels like forever. And I'm screaming in the back, just like, we're lost. And I was like, I can't, like, I cannot. Finally, we get to the hospital. I get out. I'm walking myself. Like, I'm like, nobody touch me. I'm done. I make it not very far, and there's a wheelchair, and I was like, okay, I'm getting in the wheelchair. Like, and then the wheelchair had a flat tire, so we couldn't use it. I was like, oh, this is just, and then I just started hysterically laughing, even though I was in so much pain. I was just like, this is so ridiculous. Like, I can't believe this. I come in, and I immediately go into this kind of over people pleaser situation, because there's all these new people. There's the anaesthetist who's going to do the epidural. There's other midwives too, and I'm trying my best to like have a joke with the anaesthetist, because I don't want, in my mind, I don't want him to mess up my epidural, and the only way that I know how to like feel safe is to make people feel good.
Yeah.
And so he I was holding my bum at that point, because it felt like my bum was going to fall out into my hand, and I kept saying, like, you know, he's like, you have to move your arm because I can't access where I need to go. And I was like, I can't, because if I move my hand, my butt is going to fall out. Like, it's going to, like my whole, I don't know, something's going to fall out. And I was terrified of like pooing, which of course happens, but I just didn't want that for me. So anyway, moved my hand, puts in the epidural, everything just calms down. And I feel so much better, just the relief from the labor. I lie down, and they give me a scan, and they're like, oh, baby's head's in the right position and you're fully dilated. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, you know, it kind of felt like I'd given up. And I think what was happening is that my body was actually getting ready to push, but I didn't. You don't know what you don't know. So
yeah.
Anyway, so we rested for a bit, and then it came time to push, but because I was so numb from the epidural and I didn't want Emma to go back up into me, I just pushed her out as fast as I could. And then I tore, because, you know, I just wasn't connected. I just, I pushed. And then after that, I think they were talking about getting a surgeon to come and stitch me up, but then the surgeon was busy, or I don't know, something happened. So then the midwife stitched me up. Yeah. And again, I was in a space of like, I don't care, just get it done. Let's just all go home and have kind of a good time. Anyway, when Emma came out, as I said before, I was holding Emma, and then I just knew, like, I just knew how much abuse and stuff I had been through. And then also just feeling really vulnerable with this little newborn. And I didn't know anyone who had had babies either. So, and we didn't have any family in Auckland. And so we just didn't know anything.
Can I ask, did two things. Did Jack know about the snippets that you did know about your sexual abuse at this point in the piece, or and how long ago, if you even know, how long ago had it been between when the abuse took place and when you gave birth and realized?
Yeah. So Jack knew nothing. I didn't say anything because it was actually just really overwhelming, and I didn't know how to even say it, you know, like I just didn't even know. And then the time between giving birth to Emma, I think sexually birth be maybe, oh, I'll do some quick maths. Maybe like 15 years, maybe just over 15, maybe like 17 years. So long time. Yeah, it's not like it just happened, you know, a couple of years beforehand. I was a minor. I was little. So, well, not little, but I was still not an adult when all of that happened. So, yeah.
Mate, I can't begin to imagine how you must have felt in that moment, receiving your new little baby, which in and of itself is a hugely overwhelming, yeah, you know, thing, especially on the back of a pretty difficult previous days, you know. But then to also have, and I don't know how it would have come through to you, whether it was images or thoughts or what, but this violence that had been inflicted upon you all that time ago to suddenly be coming back to you in that moment must have been really terrifying.
Yeah. So you know that point in birth where you kind of, I've heard it explained as you go up to the stars to get your baby. I don't know if you've heard that before, but it's kind of this moment of like stillness, and then you get all these like downloads, I guess. So I had a lot of imagery come through to me at that point. So that was actually just before, like it was in that quiet time before you push, or before baby comes out. So I actually kind of had all those images there, and I was like, why am I, this is so weird, right? So first it was that confusion of like, oh, and then by the time Emma got into my arms, I knew. And so again, it sounds insane, but that's what happened.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then we went to birth care afterwards. So we transferred back to birth care, which was great. So amazing there. But again, I was too scared to be an inconvenience to anyone. And if Emma was, you know, crying a lot, then a midwife would come in and help me settle her, and they helped me with the breastfeeding and everything, which was, I mean, they were just amazing. But then one of the midwives came in and told me how amazing I was doing because none of the midwives had heard from me. And that reinforced for me in my trauma brain, right? Oh my gosh, all these midwives like me for not asking for help and not annoying them. So I'm not going to ask for any more help. Like I made that decision like then and there. And so, yeah. And then later, I think maybe on the second day we were there, I accidentally like bumped the phone or like bumped something that meant it was an emergency. And so, but I didn't know that I'd done that. And so these two midwives came rushing in, like rushing. And they're like, is everything, like, what's happened? And I was like, why? Like, I don't know what has happened. Not sure.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you pushed the emergency, whatever. And I was like, in that moment, I just felt like, oh my gosh, I have taken these midwives away from whatever they were doing. It might have been really, really important to come to a non-emergency. And I felt really guilty about that. And then one of the midwives, she was like, oh, you're only supposed to do that in emergency. She kind of told me off a little bit. And I was kind of like, that made it worse, because I was like, it was really just an accident. And after that, I couldn't even be in the birth care place anymore, because I felt like all of the midwives would hate me. So we left. And we left definitely before I wanted to leave, because there were all these great classes you could go to meet other parents and stuff. And I just didn't do that. But I want to make it really clear, it's not, the midwife's fault or anything like that. It was just how I received it from being through what I had been through. So yeah, and then there was kind of this perfect storm of circumstances and events that happened after Emma's birth that just made me realize, or just, I mean, it nearly killed us, to be honest. Like, it was quite intense. So we had Emma in 2018 in November, and you remember 2020 March is COVID. Yeah. So my husband's my husband was really into his strongman at the time. Like, he was a national champion strongman guy. He was like incredible. And one of the stories that he had was that he was really what's that word? Really unmovable. Like, he wanted to make sure that because he now had a child, because he had Emma, he wasn't going to miss out on things that he wanted to do. He didn't want Emma to be the excuse that he didn't live his life to the full, basically. So actually, the day after I gave birth, he was in a national strongman competition. It's just like so crazy going back on it now. So Jack's parents had come up from Napier to meet Emma, and also to watch Jack in this strongman competition. And I had massive birth, and I was torn between wanting to stay with Emma at the birth care and just maybe have a little rest, and wanting to support my husband at his strongman competition. So I went to the strongman competition, and it was so loud. I don't know if you strongman competition is like, everybody's dropping weights, everybody's cheering. It's the most masculine, crazy place you can ever go to. And I was there with my wee Emma, and I just burst into tears just because of the loudness, and because I just didn't know what to do. So that was a big mistake. Don't go out after you
I'm so
after you've
sad.
given birth,
I'm so sad to hear that you did that.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
it wasn't great.
Mm.
The other part of the story is I lost my parents when I was young. So I lost my dad when I was 8. He committed suicide, and my mum to cancer when I was, I'm gonna say, 13.
Wow. Fire.
So I didn't have my own parents, and having a child, not having your own parents, is like it's a big decision.
Oh, yeah.
It's quite huge.
Who raised you after your mum passed?
My grandparents on my mother's side.
Right.
However, my nana and granddad and I just really didn't see eye to eye. So that was actually a hard place, and probably contributed to a lot of the sexual abuse. My nana and granddad didn't sexually abuse me, not at all. It was just the circumstances that that we found ourselves in, if you like.
Did you have any siblings you grew up
Yes.
with?
Yeah, I had a wee sister. Yeah, Laura, she's so awesome. We were not good friends growing up, but we're the best of friends now, which is great. Yeah. So not having your own parents also gives you this sense of like, oh, who can I trust? Like, who's gonna help me, kind of thing. And when Jack's parents came up, Jack's mum, she's a writer, And she has kind of lived her whole life looking after her two kids, looking after Jack and Sophie. And she's really, she's a fantastic mother. And she just, you know, she really put her whole other life on hold to like look after these kids for as long as she did. And so when she came up and when Emma was there, she kind of sat me down and said, look, like, you know, I'm really going to be focusing on my writing, and, you know, I can't be a nanny for you, and I can't, you know, do all of that stuff, but I'll definitely be there in emergencies. And that, even though I respect that so much, and I know how important that is for her, and I, you know, I just, you know, I love her so much. For me at that time, it felt like a rug had been pulled out from under me, because I was under the impression that I didn't communicate properly, that they would be able to help, you know,
Yeah.
a little bit more. And so all of a sudden I was feeling really alone, even though Jack was with me too. So, and then I didn't have the friendship group. Like I said, no one else had had kids, so they didn't really know. In fact, in that first 4 months, I think yeah, like 4 people came over to visit, and we got sent dinner once. And it's not because I have terrible friends. I have gorgeous friends. Gorgeous, gorgeous. It's just that you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I didn't know how to ask for help. That
Mhm.
was the other part.
Mhm.
I went back to work after 10 days.
Mhm.
It's so stupid, but it's because my businesses were in their infancy. Oh, Onehunga was anyway. And so I did a lot of work just from my laptop and my phone and stuff. I had set it up so I didn't actually have to go in. So that was really good. Emma, she wouldn't take a bottle, well, reliably. And I produced way too much milk. But at that time in our lives, we actually couldn't afford to buy like a breast pump and stuff. So I expressed manually. And that just takes longer, right? So it was just, you know, it just made, so I did all of the feeding, all of the nighttime wakes. Emma wouldn't sleep for more than about 45 minutes. She was a colicky baby, and the sleep deprivation was just awful. And then from about 3 p.m. to about midnight for the first kind of probably about 6 months of her life, she would just scream, and there was just nothing. There was just nothing I could do. And because we lived in such a small little apartment, you could hear everything. And so I was always so aware that everyone's going to be hearing the screaming baby every night. And there was just nothing I could do. I took her to chiropractors, I took her to osteo, and I changed my diet. And, you know, you just do everything that you can. But at the end of the day, it was what it was.
Mhm.
And it's awful seeing your baby in that much pain for that long. You know, it was just so hard. And because I couldn't put her down for a nap and do work, I had to breastfeed her and do work or push her in the pram and do work. And so there was never like a break. And then on top of that, Jack won't mind. I asked Jack if it's okay if I can share this, because he talks about it quite openly. But Jack was complaining that there wasn't enough air in his workplace, that he, like his office, he's like, there's just not enough air, like I can't breathe. And what I didn't realize is that he was actually having anxiety attacks, and he would come home from work every day and he would just lie on the floor and not be able to move at all, like can't move. That went on for like 4 months. He was just, and he slept all night, he just couldn't. So I was just that alone, you know, not being able to ask for help. And then unfortunately, Plunkett and, you know, all of those support services that are around, I didn't know about them, but I knew about Plunkett. But the Plunkett people that they had, they were like short-staffed, and they like kept missing appointments. And it was just like, I was just like, hey, whatever, like it doesn't matter, we don't, you know, I was like, it's okay, I'll do it on my own, because that's what I had grown up learning how to do. Because when you lose your parents at such a young age, you just you get on with it, you know.
Mm.
Emma was 4 months and COVID hit, and
Mm.
I remember watching Jacinda on my laptop giving that announcement, you know, she's like, no one's allowed to leave their home for 4 weeks and then we'll revisit it. And I was just like, nah, no way, absolutely no way am I going to be stuck in here. And the apartment building that we were in, they put up all these crazy rules around like who was allowed to use the stairs when, and like
Oh,
who was allowed to use the lifts. And I was like, I can't. And also Jack being so depressed at that time, even though we didn't know he was depressed, it was triggering me and I didn't know it because my dad had been so unwell. You know, I can look back now and know, but at the time I didn't. And I just knew that I also couldn't be with Jack the whole day and the whole night and the whole day and the whole night and with Emma. Like it just, yeah.
And that must have been terrifying for you as well, you know, having lost your dad to suicide, with him obviously having mental health stuff going on, and then to feel that you were unable to support your man through what he was clearly going through, some heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Holy hell.
I look back now and I'm like, I just, unfortunately, all of my energy was being, well, not unfortunately, it's just the way it was. All my energy was being given to Emma because she was so colicky and in so much pain. And then I was super sleep deprived. And then the rest of whatever I had was going into my businesses because they were new as well. And I actually didn't have any capacity for Jack at all.
Yeah.
And I feel like the worst wife in the world saying that, but that's how it was. I couldn't even get myself together to realize that he was having depression, and I just couldn't, because I just didn't have the space.
No.
No. So after that Jacinda address, I was like, done, packed up the whole apartment. I called some friends. I was like, come over, I'm leaving. Like, we are leaving Auckland. Like, I cannot. I need a backyard. That is all I need. And I knew in Napier that we could get a rental with a backyard, like relatively the same price as we were paying in Napier. Drove down in the middle of the night with all our stuff with Emma. Jack was away for work at that time anyway, so that was fine. We're going to meet him in Napier. And went in. I was like, I need to rent a house. Here's a house, cool. Went into Harvey Norman. I need a washing machine, I need a dryer, and I need a couch. Like, give it to me, right? I need a cot. I need a everything. And then they said, I'll never forget this. Like, oh, unfortunately, we're unable to deliver anything at the moment because, you know, it's going to be locked down tomorrow. And I was, oh my God, I was with Emma and I was, you will deliver this. I was like, there is no way. I can't, you know, I was just like, I didn't yell at them, but I was like, you need to deliver this. Like, you have no idea. So we got that and we went into lockdown, and Jack's depression got worse, and because of the social distancing and all the fear, there was zero support, because we moved to Napier and Jack's parents lived in Napier, but they couldn't come because, you know, and I couldn't get him off the couch, all that kind of stuff. And then one day Jack came home from taking Emma for a walk because that's how she would go to sleep, and he said to me, we were walking, he's like, I want to throw Emma in the river, like, I've had enough. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is not good. Now, the fact that he told me that showed me that he wasn't going to do it. Like, that, you know, he was just saying to me, this is how much I'm struggling. And so then I was like, I can't do it anymore. And I called Jack's parents to come down. I was like, we can't, like, there's nothing I can do. They took him to the doctor and he got some help, which was really great. He went on his meds, and then he slowly started to get better, which was great. But actually, I was really struggling too, you know. And I went to my GP, and well, the GP that I was available at that time, because I'd started to get really obsessed with things with Emma. Like, I wouldn't give her food that wasn't organic, which is like, I get that, but I was overly like that, right? I didn't want anyone to touch her, you know, if they hadn't washed her hands. I didn't feel comfortable with having anyone hold her. You know, any noise that she made, I would be right there. You know,
So hypervigilance, right? This is yeah. Nervous system is on high alert all the time, catastrophizing everything, expecting worst case scenario to happen every time. And you are just like, yeah, you are hyper vigilant. You cannot stop that anxious piece of your mind that says, yeah, something bad's going to happen, something bad's going to happen, something bad's going to happen.
Totally. And then one night when she was maybe about 6, I didn't want to sleep train her either. That was the other thing, because I just couldn't handle the screaming. You know, people say, oh, don't put some headphones on. But I was not in that space.
Yeah.
I was totally not in that space. And so one night when Jack was like particularly depressed, I was done. So when my dad died when I was 8 years old, I made a pact with myself, like, I will never commit suicide ever. Like, I'll just never do it. But that night I got Emma and I put it in the car and I drove to the beach. Sorry, it was a long time ago. It's still getting me like, and I just stood at the edge of the water and I was like, we're gonna go in, you know, like we're gonna but then luckily during COVID, there was a lot of like, call this helpline, and you know, there was a lot of that kind of stuff. And I did. And that, I can't even remember the number, but it wasn't hard to find. And they pulled me back. And I don't think I would have done it, but that's how kind of desperate I was. And then the next day I went to my GP. I went to a GP because I was like, actually, I feel depressed. Told the GP how I was feeling, like, you know, be really low and just trying to stay awake. But then throughout my life, I've been one of my superpowers again is to be able to pick myself out of that place and then work from this kind of like disassociated, hyper place where I can get things done. And I told the doctor that, like, I was having these really big lows and these really big highs. And he said to me, oh, it sounds like you have a personality disorder. There's really nothing we can do about that. You can have some counseling if you want. And I was like, oh my God. I was just like, okay, there's no point in talking to this guy any further. Like, I'm not going to fight this. And that really affirmed to me that, like, okay, no, I really am. This is me. Like, I actually just have to figure this out for myself. And somehow, I don't know how, but I did. And we got through. And then I got pregnant again. Like, Emma would have been maybe 2. Yep, Emma would have been about 2. I got pregnant again. And at that time, I was like, yeah, okay, like, I'm ready to do this again. I was terrified, obviously, after the whole experience that I had been through, but I was also really excited.
I have to ask, I just can't let you jump into about your next pregnancy until I go, how the fuck did you do that? Did you go from that dismissive doctor appointment to, you said, so I realized I was kind of on my own and I had to just do it myself, and I did it.
Yeah.
How? Is there any, like, and that's probably too tricky to, flesh out in a major way, but what are some key
Mm,
little
things.
tips?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, key things. Have you ever heard that saying that says, don't be pushed by problems, be led by your dreams?
Yeah.
That's what I did. I dreamed. I dreamed a life, and I dreamed a life where my businesses were really thriving, and I dreamed a life where my body was really fit and healthy, and I dreamed a life where I was really happy and could do yoga, and I don't know, I just like dreamed up this like delusional life. And then I started taking steps to get there. So what that looked like was being really onto it with my nutrition, making sure I was eating. That was a big one because it's really hard to eat when you've got so making sure I was eating properly. When everything started opening back up, I found a CrossFit gym who they just had the most, honestly, the guy there, Nick, who owns it, the most inclusive, gorgeous members ever. Everyone's just so, just amazing. And I just felt like a part of a team again. And I went there 4 mornings a week, and I just really enjoyed getting my body moving and lifting some weights and feeling a bit like myself. And then I also had my studios, which I'm super passionate about. So I had not only my family to work for, but, my studios and every single person who was in them. Like every day I have a practice where I open up Instagram and I follow so many of the students from the studios on there, and I read what they write and I watch their dancing, and that practice just gets me to be like, it's worth it, it's worth it, it's worth it, because I see the value that it's bringing everyone. So yeah, and again, that sounds nuts, but that was my practice. Yeah.
That sounds so far from nuts. I think I love this. And I reckon there'll be a heap of people listening to this who can see ways that they can apply that into their lives, without too much effort, without kind of having to pay money or to like give up this or that from their lives. Like, this is a really beautiful share you've just offered right
Cool.
there, because that's something we can probably all do a little more of,
Yeah.
having a vision for what we're wanting to create and taking small steps to bring that vision into fruition. Yeah, beautiful.
A little bit. Yeah. So yes, we're pregnant with Hugo. Okay. So at the time that I got pregnant with Hugo, not pregnant with Hugo, sorry, at the time that I got pregnant, the second time after Emma, I came across on Instagram, oh my gosh, what is it called? I think it's called Our Rescue, or it's basically a page that's like, here's what pedophiles do to get your children. And these are the kind of things that they sent them. And a post came up, and it was screenshots of chats, like Snapchats or like text messages, of the words and the coercion and the blackmail that that predators use on young people to get them to meet up with them or whatever.
The grooming.
The grooming, okay. And then, so I hadn't actually thought about my sexual abuse since I was holding Emma in my arms that first time. I just knew it, pushed it away. But I read those messages, and they were verbatim. They were verbatim the exact messages that I was groomed on. And then it just all came flooding back. It just all came flooding back. So I was just in this space where I just remembered all this stuff. And I sat Jack down and I said to him, like, Jack, like, I've been raped a lot of times. And he's like, what? Because, we've known each other for like 6 years already. How has this never come up, kind of thing? And I kind of told him a little bit about it. And I have some really great friends who are good at holding space for me and that kind of thing too. And I told them and felt really, really held. But what manifested from that is I was more scared than ever before of other people holding Emma.
Yeah.
So it meant that I didn't want to send her to daycare. No way. But I knew I needed to get some help. So we got a nanny who came over 3 days a week, or 3 afternoons a week, I think it was. And she was so amazing. And she was like the only other person that I trusted with Emma. And you know, we're still close friends with her now, like in her family, you know, like they're like another family for us. And but what happened, unfortunately, is that pregnancy, you know, when you get pregnant, your moods are not great anyway, and you're just not feeling great. It was my sister-in-law's wedding. And initially, my sister-in-law had said no babies at the wedding, no children, which I respected. So I was like, I'm not going to go to the wedding because I don't trust anyone. I can't leave Emma for that long, kind of thing. But then she changed her mind. She's like, oh, you can bring Emma because her husband had her sister had another baby, so there'd be 2 babies, so it wouldn't be like too big. So they got us a little house that was on where it was where the wedding was, so it was really close, so we don't have to travel, all that kind of stuff. So that was really great. I was feeling really good about that. And I brought the nanny with us so that I could sit and have dinner, because I felt like I just deserved a really nice dinner. And you know, a good time. Family weddings are always really great. And then I came back to the wee house, and there was all of these kids and a person who I'd never met before. And this lady was like, oh, is this where we drop our kids off? And I was like, oh my God, like, because remember at this time I didn't trust anyone else with Emma, and all of a sudden she was without me with all of these other kids with this other lady that I just didn't know. And apparently there was meant to be another lady who came as well. But oh my gosh, like something in me that night absolutely snapped, because I was convinced. First of all, I was like, how could my sister-in-law do this to me? Like, how could she say no kids and then let everyone bring their kids, and they drop her off, and they're allowed to drop their kids off at the place where my Emma is, you know? Like, it was just inconceivable to me that anyone could do that and then expect my nanny to look after everyone. But I bought my nanny to look after Emma. And so that wasn't a great wedding for me. Anyway, and I was pregnant at the same time. And I didn't want to tell anyone because it was sister-in-law's wedding, all that kind of stuff. We were also moving house. So was waiting to tell people. And then we got to, I think I was like, I don't know how many weeks pregnant I was, maybe like 10 weeks, like quite far along, like 10 weeks along. Started telling people, and then I started bleeding. And I was like, oh man, you know, not this again. Went to the scan, and they said, oh, there's no evidence of pregnancy here. We can't see anything. And I was like, but I'm pregnant. Like, I'm definitely pregnant. I feel pregnant. My blood say I'm pregnant. Like, there's no evidence of pregnancy. I was like, oh, nah. I was like, I'd learned by then, right? I was like, no, I want another scan with another person.
Yes.
I want another scan with another person. So I went to the Hawke's Bay, the hospital, had another scan with another person, and that lady, the person who did the scan, she's like, oh, yeah, here it is. And it had just tucked up. The pregnancy had just tucked up right like in this little kind of hook from where the fallopian tubes meet the ovary. And yeah, so then I had to go through the whole ectopic pregnancy thing again, which was a bit of a bummer, really. A bummer for us. And I really grieved that pregnancy. After that, and then after that, we kind of keep going along. I'm sure I'm missing out a lot of stuff. Emma was around, all that kind of stuff. Still wanted to try again for a baby. And then I got pregnant with Hugo, which was very exciting. And of course, I was really nervous about, is it going to be another ectopic pregnancy, blah, blah, blah. So I actually went to see a pelvic floor physio because I hadn't heard of a pelvic floor physio before. And I also knew from doing all my CrossFit and stuff that things just didn't feel, as tight and as good as they used to. And I did all my pelvic floor exercises and stuff, but it kind of just wasn't working no matter how much I was doing it. Come to the pelvic floor physio. This is just before I got pregnant with Hugo. And she is incredible. Her name's Bernadette. And we talked a little bit about my history, not the sexual abuse or anything, just like that I've had ectopic pregnancies. And she did an internal examination, and I cannot tell you, I have never felt so cared for and so considered in like a physio/medical setting before.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really special. And so she did an internal examination, and she said to me, she's like, oh, she didn't kind of say, oh, she was really professional about it. She said to me, does your vagina look the same as when before you had Emma? And you know how before I told you I can see like people, yeah. I was like she's seeing something that I don't know. And I said, I honestly don't know, because before then I had never looked at my vagina in a mirror ever, because there was just so much shame associated with it. Like that goes back to a lot of sexual abuse too, but I'm not going into that. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess it's fine. And she's like, okay, well that's fine. And then she started feeling around more. And then she's like, really taking her time. And then she's like, it's really locked up in here. And I was like, okay. And then she's like, well, have you had any sexual abuse? She just straight out asked me. And I was like, yeah, like I have. And she's like, okay. And then she explained to me that, how our bodies can go into like shutdown. Well, our ovaries and our fallopian tubes and everything can also freeze like that. And so it makes so much sense why I had these ectopic pregnancies, because the egg would get released and then the little wavy, I cannot remember the name of the wavy things that wave them down.
Embryo, they wave the egg into the fallopian tube, and that's where it usually meets the sperm cell. Yeah.
Yes. So my wavies were not waving.
Right.
Because they were frozen, like they were shut down. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, why did nobody tell me? Like, holy shit, that would have been a game changer for me if I had known that, right? Yeah. So anyway, I actually felt so much relief after that, because I was like, okay, I know what I need to do now, Oh, and so then got pregnant with Hugo.
What did you need to do? What did
I need to do?
Yeah.
I just really needed to connect more with my body, right? And be a lot more kinder to myself and a lot more present and all of that kind of stuff. So took up like a meditation/yoga practice and really worked on that. So yeah, then got pregnant with Hugo. And that was at the time where they brought in the mandatory vaccines.
Right.
I think I was maybe like, I'm gonna say like 7 months pregnant with Hugo at that time, maybe 8 months. And I personally had a really bad reaction to I think it was a meningococcal vaccine when I was at high school. And so I was very nervous about this new vaccine, as a lot of people were. And I was also very nervous because I was pregnant. And I knew that there's no way this this vaccine has been tested on pregnant people. Like there's not enough time.
Yeah.
But again, it meant that if I chose not to get vaccinated, then I couldn't go to CrossFit and I couldn't go to my businesses and I couldn't, it was all shut down. And also Jack's family are very super pro vaccine, that's great. I'm not anti either. So I was just in the middle for myself. So I felt like I wasn't definitely like, everyone needs to get vaccinated and the devils if they're not. And I definitely wasn't, oh my gosh, the people who get vaccinated are idiots. I was literally just like, I want to do the best thing for my baby and I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So I felt really in a kind of, I don't know, I just felt a bit stuck at that time. Oh, actually, it was about 3 months, when I was about 3 months pregnant, actually, with Hugo when that happened.
Okay.
And it got me so wound up because I was so having the experience I'd had with Emma. I didn't want to be alone again.
Yeah.
And I was like, am I going to have this baby at home with no support? And then I'm going to have 2 kids and everyone's going to be locked down. Like it was just, it really played on my mind. And I got to that space where I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to have an abortion because like I can't, like I just don't know if I can do it, even though I really wanted this baby.
Yeah.
So I went camping with Emma to try and like figure it all out. And that was a disaster because we got stuck in the river. It was like a whole thing. But it did give me the clarity I needed. And I was like, no, I'm gonna hold on to this wee babe. So going into this birth, I'd had all the experience I'd had with Emma. I'd had all the realizations around sexual abuse and my coping mechanisms around it. And so I decided that I wanted to try for a home birth. And I got a doula, Alexa. Oh, best decision ever. Best decision ever. Best decision ever. She, I actually don't think I told, I think I definitely would have told her about my sexual abuse, and how that showed up for me. And she guided me through how to set up our space and how I can choose and work with a midwife. And we sat down, we had so many great discussions about like, okay, this is what it looks like when I'm fawning. These are the specific things that are going to take me out of my birthing body. These are the things that I absolutely need to happen. And these are things I, can't handle. That might seem okay to you, but I cannot do it, right?
Yes.
So having all of that knowledge was just so much power, and it really comes down to that like know thyself thing. Everyone's different in what they need, and the more that you can figure that out, which is what Alexa helped me do with all of her great questions, the more I could figure it out. And the other thing that she led me to figure out for myself was, because I was terrified of having a baby in hospital again. And but she kind of got me to a place where I was okay with having the baby at home and I was okay with having the baby in hospital. And that is the exact place you need to be to birth a baby, because you can't be holding on either way.
Because you don't know how it's going to unfold, right?
No.
So be able to surrender, like know you've done all you can to prepare it as best you can for the birth that you're seeking.
Yeah.
And then to let go and say, okay, I'm just going to trust that however this unfolds, my support team, they know what's important to me.
Yeah.
I've done all that I can and now let go.
Yeah. Which I didn't have the first time around, which was, just so empowering. And I wasn't scared to message Alexa. I wasn't scared to message my midwife. We had such a beautiful birth here, like at home. So I'd gotten everything that I needed, right? Everything. Bought just had it set up with beautiful fairy lights and birth pool and like a Swiss ball and like the right music and like all of this, like, and I was so ready to go. I had all the towels. And then Hugo didn't come. He didn't come on his due date. He didn't come. And I was convinced that this guy was going to come early. Like, so from about 38 weeks, I was like, he's going to come today. Got to 40 weeks. He's going to come today. He didn't come today, right? And then I got to like 41 weeks and 41 and a half weeks and then 42 weeks. And I was, I just that end part of that pregnancy. Oh my gosh. And what I did in the end is I put all of the birth stuff away. I was like, he's just not coming. He's not going to come. So I took down the birth pool, took down the light, put away all the towels. Just was like, no, okay, that's fine. And I did a puzzle, and that's kind of where I was with that. There's another really important piece to that I have forgotten. Put it all away.
Were you really sweet with being at 42 weeks? You weren't getting pressure from any angles to induce?
No, because at that point I had incredible discussions with my midwife and my doula, and they just knew that I was not about it.
Beautiful. Perfect.
And I remember Beatrix saying, now I have to ask you this question. She's like, do you want to be induced? And I was like, no, they have to ask the questions, right? And I was like, there's no way. I'll take this baby as long as it comes. And, and there's all that stuff about, the longer you leave it, the more at risk your baby's going to, I'm like, nah, because I also knew I was connected at that time. I knew that Hugo was okay.
Yep.
Yes. So I put away all of the birth stuff. It wasn't coming. And then I wrote a letter to Hugo. I didn't know he was a boy, but I wrote a letter to baby. And it was just like apologizing for, considering to abort him, and just telling him it was safe to come now, and all this kind of stuff. And I also drew this picture of this beautiful phoenix. I've still got it. I painted it with this like gorgeous sun and like these flames. I just felt really cool to paint that. And it was really interesting because it's the day that I finished it, then the proper contraction started, right? Like it was just like waiting for that. So I labored pretty much all through the night, just by myself. I wanted to be by myself, and I was just looking at the stars, and it was Matariki at that time as well. So it was just like this, it felt amazing, honestly. It just was just so lovely, so different to my other birth. So we started contractions maybe like when the sun went down, 6-7 o'clock-ish, right? Labored up until, like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And then it started getting a little bit more intense, and the midwife was there by then, and my doula was there, and she was, letting me be alone when I needed to be alone and supporting me when I needed support. And then my midwife got out all the things to catch the baby, got out the towels and the hot water bottle and like all of this. And I was like, oh, the baby's coming. And called the second midwife, because you have to have 2 midwives at a home birth. I don't know if it's still like that now, but it was back then. Second midwife comes. And then, no, baby wasn't coming. Also, but at that point, I'd actually refused any dilation checks. I didn't want any checks because of the mindset that it put me into with Emma. I was like, I don't want anyone to check me.
Yeah.
Kept laboring. Sun comes up. And then my waters hadn't broken. Then Beatrix was like, I want to check you. And I was like, oh man, like, okay. But unknowing to me, Alexa had talked to Beatrix before and said, is it possible to check her and just not tell her how dilated she is? And Beatrix was like, yeah. And so Beatrix came in, she felt around, and she said to me, oh, you are dilating beautifully. It feels all nice and soft. This is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, like, this is great.
Yes. Yes.
Beatrix also had acupuncture as well. She used acupuncture in her birthing, which was such a game changer for me. Then it started getting really intense. I came into my bedroom like in the dark and had those contractions where they're like, so I would stand up and hold on to Jack. That was so intense. And then I'd literally fall asleep in between them, but the sleep was like a minute long or 30 seconds long, but I was actually asleep. It was amazing. And then I'll wake up ready for the next one. Then I came out into the sunshine and labored there for a bit. I had a pool, but I didn't want to birth in the pool. I knew as soon as I got in the pool, I was like, I don't want to be in here.
Yeah.
And then I ended up birthing Hugo at midday. So it was quite a longish labor, but nowhere near as long as Emma's. Next to my pole dancing pole, I use that a lot in the labor, holding on to Jack. Hugo comes out. He's the most beautiful boy. I turn around and I think, oh my gosh, like when I looked at him, all I could see was my dad, John. And I just burst into tears. I just couldn't believe and I said to Jack, I've given birth to my father. Like, this is crazy. This is so weird. And then I looked up at that phoenix picture and I was like, oh, like it all made sense, like the phoenix and the rebirth and the sun and the masculine. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is nuts.
Wow.
And then yeah, and I'll come back to this part, but a little bit after that, one of my dad's friends, who I haven't heard from forever, contacted me out of nowhere, and he had this big folder of things from my dad. Like, he'd done paintings of my dad, and he had all these stories about my dad, and just like it just felt like my Hugo's just such a gift from my father. Like, it's just incredible. And Hugo, he's so sweet, he's so gentle, and just the opposite to my daughter. Anyway, coming back to the birth, I was exhausted and I gave Hugo to Jack straight away, and they had the most beautiful skin to skin cuddles, and everyone helped me clean up, and it was just a really nice time. And Emma came to meet him, and oh my gosh. And then that night, so this is the first, so Hugo's been alive for 4 hours. Jack starts vomiting, and I was like, oh my God, what's going on? This is crazy. Emma starts vomiting. Jane and
no.
Jack's parents start vomiting, and I was like, oh no. And like,
No.
so we got in gastro.
Oh God.
And Jack was so sick, but also, after birth, you're so exhausted.
Yeah.
And so I was like cleaning up Jack's vomit, and then I was like attending to baby, and I was just like, oh, and then I got into that spiral of like, oh no, I'm alone again. And then the next morning I had Hugo and Emma, and I took them to the supermarket, and like I started cleaning and I started doing all this stuff.
Right.
And I was like, oh no, that feeling came back. And then Hugo started crying heaps, and he wasn't breastfeeding well. And I was like, oh no. And then it was about 4 days later. Yeah, 4 days at home. 4 days later, I started getting really big fevers, like shaking, and then, and I was crawling from room to room. And yeah, I was just like really sick. And so I called my midwife, and I was like, I'm not doing well. Hugo was losing heaps of weight. He was born at 4 kgs, and he was down to like 2 point something in, And so we're like, what's wrong with Hugo? What's wrong with Hugo? We can't figure out what's wrong with him. All this time, I'm so focused on Hugo that I've completely just neglected my own self. Beatrix came, she felt my tummy. She's like, no, it feels okay. But I'd forgotten that with the sexual abuse and stuff, it can come up that I don't feel pain, especially down there. And so my body had cut it off. So I wasn't feeling any pain. And then by the time Saturday came around, I tried to put Hugo in a car seat to go to the doctor, and I couldn't lift Hugo in the car seat. And I got Jack's mum to take me to the city medical, and they were like, oh, you've got septicaemia, you have to go to the hospital. From that ambulance ride from city medical to the actual hospital, I just got so much worse. And then, to be honest, I actually can't remember much, but everyone was saying that I nearly died. I was so close to death. And I come back. And of course, then when I started getting better, then Hugo started putting on weight again. And yeah, that was just a really rough start into Hugo's life. And then 2 weeks after that, we all got COVID. Hugo got COVID, he stopped breathing, and I thought I'd lost him. It was the most scariest thing ever. And when I was really sick, because I was still recovering from the sepsis, and the COVID hit me really badly. And so I couldn't rock Hugo all night, and I couldn't do the skin to skin thing, because I knew that I just had to look after myself. And so luckily Jack's parents came, and we took turns at having skin to skin with him and just rocking him to sleep. And then he recovered, which was, just amazing. Yeah, so it's just a really happy story, really. And I've been so blessed with my children. And then not long after that, well, not long, Hugo was 1, then I got diagnosed with melanoma. And that again was just like a whole, because I wasn't feeling right from the time I had Hugo. I just kind of never got better. And I thought maybe that's like what happens with sepsis, or maybe that's what happens when you've just had like a big birth. And I still have my businesses, and I was still trying to do too much, even though I'd come so far. And I went to the doctor, and the first mole check I got, they were like, nah, it's fine. And I was like, but my mum had melanoma, and this doesn't look right to me. And oh, well, you can get a second opinion if you want, but it looks fine to us. But by then I had learned how to connect with my body, and I had learned how to listen to my intuition to be like, nah, I'm going to get another opinion. Went to another GP. Other GP was like, nah, it's fine. And I was like, oh, no. And I changed GPs. I didn't say anything about it to her, but she, before I could say anything, she was like, we need to get that mold off right away. And so, yeah, and then we got it off. It came back positive and went through surgery, and I've been having cancer treatment ever since. And so I've taken a real step back from my businesses, but I've never felt more connected to myself or my children or my husband for my whole life. I feel, even though I'm doing this cancer thing, I actually feel really, really good. Obviously there's so much sickness and everything that comes from that, but I said to Jack last night, if you were going to do the year we had Emma again, or this year again, which one would you do? And he's like, definitely this year. So yeah.
What's enabled that, do you think, that attitude at this? It must be hugely difficult in a lot of regards. What's enabled such a positive mindset around it all, and feeling more connected to your man and your kids and yourself than ever?
I think it's a mixture of things. Firstly, I think when you've been through hard things have happened in your life and you've gotten through them, the next hard thing that comes, you know that you can get through it too, because it's just like it's like a confidence thing.
Recognizing your resilience, your strength and your courage. Yeah.
Yep. That. Also, I ended up, after Hugo was born, I ended up making a sensitive claim with ACC, which I didn't know that you could do. I thought you'd had to go through the court system and then get like free counseling from there. And I was not going to go through the court system because I have been witnesses to stuff and been through the court system, and it is not ideal. And I didn't want to put myself through that. So I made a sensitive claim, and I got buddied up with my therapist who I have now. And actually, I had some other coaching therapy before that as well. And I got diagnosed with cPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress. So we all know PTSD as someone who comes home from war, hears a car backfire and thinks, oh my gosh, I'm getting shot at.
Yeah.
Complex PTSD is exactly what it says. It's just complex, and the triggers that happen around me, I could never say what all the triggers are because it's happened over such a long period of time that it could be like a particular smell with the sky that's a particular color with a sound of a bird, and that trigger me. So it's a losing battle trying to figure out what your triggers are. I guess the thing that I've learned is just how really to notice earlier when I feel like I'm getting triggered, not having to be like, oh, I need to move away from this thing because it's triggering me, but learning how to stay grounded in that, which is, I mean, it sounds easy, but it's a little bit tricky. Yeah, so that's really helped with that. And then with the cancer stuff, I've been really supported. So the cancer treatment that I needed is not funded by the government, and it's not funded even now. Even now they've brought out the new stuff. And so we fundraised like $120,000 or something. Because there's just no way we could afford it, but there was also no way that I was just going to die. You know? Not after everything. And I've never felt so supported by my community in my whole entire life. Like watching the Give a Little page turn over all of that money is just, I think, like, in a way that in itself has healed me, you know. Like that is a big part of the cancer healing, actually, to know that I just do have so much support around me, and all I need to do is ask, you know.
Is the Give a Little page an ongoing thing? Is that something we can link?
Nah, I've taken it down. We've got enough to pay for the treatment now. So
amazing. Great.
Yeah. So, and you know, I just feel so blessed that I'm able to live the rest of my life with my kids.
Yeah. And that's the expectation, that's the outlook with this medication you now have.
Yeah, it's a really great drug. Unfortunately, it wasn't around when my mum had melanoma. So yeah. Yeah, they did give me the option not to do it. It was definitely like you can do this and it would be really advisable. This is what the rest of the world does. This is the treatment that we would put you on. However, in New Zealand, it is, you know, 100K plus. So if you don't do it, we're just, you know, we'll check you out in 6 months. And as soon as I heard them say, we'll give you another check in 6 months, when my mum got melanoma, she was given 3 months to live. And so I just wasn't going to leave that to chance. Like, I didn't want to come back in 6 months and then be like, oh, you're terminal, now you can get the treatment for free. No. No, I'd rather pay for it and then not get to that stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So where's your health at now?
Yeah, so I've got no evidence of cancer, which is amazing, and I've got about yeah, I know. I've got about 5 treatments to go, 5 more immunotherapy treatments, and my body's been responding really well to those. It's definitely been a year, because every treatment I am sick and I am tired and it is a battle. But then I get 2 weeks of kind of feeling normal-ish, and then it's back. Then it's back. But I can do that, you know?
So 5 more weeks?
5 more 5 more weeks. So the treatment goes for a whole year. Sorry, I didn't explain this very well. Treatment goes for a whole year, and I get treatment every 3 weeks for an entire year. Yeah. 5 to go.
Almost there,
I
almost.
know.
How amazing.
How
Far
amazing.
out.
Yeah, how
What
amazing.
an absolute legend you are, Sarah. Oh my goodness.
I just rambled. I realized we've rambled for so long, and
Well, we haven't rambled. You have a story, my friend, that takes a bit of time to share. I've written down 3 questions that that I was like, I didn't want to interrupt your story, but and the answers might be quite insignificant, and if they are, we can always just
totally.
whatever. But what gestation were you when you ended up going into labor with Hugo?
Oh, I think I was 42 plus 6, so nearly
Okay,
44.
great. I love that I asked that then, because there will be a
Yeah.
lot of people who have been of the opinion, or who have been made to believe that 42 weeks is the cutoff, and and that it's dangerous and da 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 da. So you went to 42.6. Cool. Your midwife did the vaginal exam, and under Alexa's suggestion, didn't share with you her findings. Did you find out afterwards how dilated you?
So I was only 3 to 4 centimeters dilated after all
Boom.
the time in labor, but because of my mindset, right? I just I went from, I went from 3 to 4 centimeters to 10 centimeters in like 2 hours or an hour or something.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And
Like,
this is the power of the mind. And this is
yeah,
yay, Alexa, you legend,
yeah.
for making that suggestion. And it's I've heard of this being done before.
Oh, shit.
Is
Sorry. No, you come and talk to this lady with me. Ah, here we go.
Hi Hugo. Hi.
Say hello.
Yeah. Hi. um yeah, there's such a powerful psychological component that goes hand in hand with having a vaginal exam,
Yes.
and of course also with a history of what you've talked
Yeah.
about, that
Yeah.
can
Just
also
triggers you. Yeah. Yeah.
it can make you want to close up and what um so that's so cool, because if you've been told that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wonder what it would have been like for you if you'd been told you were 3 to 4 centimeters, you know?
I would have given up, honestly. Like, I would have, because at that point, like I said, I was okay with going to hospital, and I was okay staying at home, and I would have it wouldn't have been like I would have fawned and been like, oh no, everyone looks really tired, all that kind of stuff. But I would have been done, because it was just intense. It's just birth, right? It's just real intense. And once you've been in contractions for so long, it was like, because it was nearly a 24-hour labor, which I mean isn't a super long labor, but it's still a long time compared to some people who have, 3 hours or have it in the car or whatever.
And did your midwife feel okay about carrying on with that information? She was like, she wasn't, she was like, oh, well, for as long as you're sort of seeming like you're still okay with things, let's just see
Yeah,
where it goes. And it was more of a baseline for her to assess against if it would work.
do you know what she did tell me afterwards?
Yeah.
That she had to make a decision. Kind of, I think she talked to Alexa about it, I'm not too sure, but she had to make a decision to trust me, because from the time that she checked me and I was 3, 4 centimeters dilated, like it was very close after that I gave birth.
Yeah.
And not being fully dilated at birth, like if you're, if baby's coming down, you're not fully dilated, she said that it can be quite dangerous. I didn't know, I didn't know that, but I didn't know how it could be because the baby's head could have come out. But anyway, for whatever reason, she needed to know that I was fully dilated, but she didn't have evidence that I was fully dilated. So I think for her, that was new, like a new thing to do, to kind of let me birth without actually being able to see that I was fully dilated. So
I
yeah.
think you and her together, like that in this relationship, helped bust a myth for her, because this is one of the beliefs that's widespread amongst the midwife community, is that you have to be 10 centimeters dilated before you start pushing, or else the cervix will get swollen and could, and like, I don't know, that seems to be the main issue.
Yeah.
Yet there's no evidence for this.
Mm.
And there's some brilliant work, article and podcast episode done by Dr. Rachel Reed, an Australian.
Oh, she's awesome. Her book is so good. Hey,
so
I read
good.
it twice. It was so good.
It is so good.
Yeah.
Yes. Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage
Oh,
is
best book.
the book. Everybody's listening, and it's like, yeah. But also the Midwives Cauldron podcast, and just Rachel Reed's website with her articles. Just, it's all evidence-based, whereas a lot of the practices that continue to go on when you're under doctor or midwifery care are not evidence-based.
Yeah.
They're spoken to you as though it's talked about as though this is what needs to happen, this is what, this is what we do in this situation, this is the safest way to deal with this and manage this. Yeah. A lot of it's bullshit. So it sounds like you helped your midwife bust a myth.
It's so good. Right.
And now hopefully she's less inclined to feel the need to pressure women to have a vaginal exam when she's pushy. Okay, just roll with it. Do whatever your body's asking you to do. Your body is wise.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. How cool. I'm stoked I'm asking these questions. Well, the final one then, let's see if this reaps any beauties. Was you said that after Hugo's birth, you connected with somebody you hadn't for a long time, who was your dad's friend, and he gave you a box of stuff that was your dad's. Now, I didn't know if there was something in that box that you were going to speak to that you forgot to, because you've been talking about the phoenix and your boy looking like his dad, like your dad. Was there anything that came up with him giving you the box of your dad's things that you needed to say?
Lots. Yeah. So this is really healing for me too. So growing up, because my dad was he was mentally sick, schizophrenia and depression, back in like the late 80s, early 90s-ish time, where, oh my gosh, people just didn't talk about mental health and depression and all that kind of stuff, even though it was, so unfortunately, my family had just kind of not swept it under the rug, but just kind of, because taking your own life is a sin, right? And so my dad, especially on my mum's side, was never portrayed in the best light to me. And the other part of that is that my mum's side of the family, anytime I did something naughty or, whatever, they would always say to me, "Oh, you're just like your father," that was the biggest insult that I could be given. That was like the ultimate, like, "Oh my gosh, you're just like your father," kind of thing. And so I grew up with all these stories of my dad just, doing all these terrible things, and like he was the worst person ever, and da da da. But then that didn't really fit with me and my vision that I had, or my perception that I had of him, because I knew him as my dad as a little girl, and like cuddles and, you know, like all of that kind of stuff. So that was really confusing. So this box that came with this folder, it had all of these stories about, you know, what a great entrepreneur my father was, and, you know, how good at business, and he was really good with people, and you know, and just a lot of the things that I love about myself came from him, and they're really positive, wonderful things. And that helped me heal the relationship, I guess, with my dad too. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, how amazing. Oh, whoa. Wow. Yeah.
I
What a ride
know.
you've taken us on this morning, Sarah.
I know, I know. You know what? It's just such a long story, and I realize it's so long, but when I was, you know, deciding like what are the things like I absolutely want to say, and like how do I want this to serve people, blah blah blah. I think that if you know that you've had, and it doesn't even have to be sexual abuse, just like abuse in general, the more that you can know yourself, and the more that you know about that, and the more you can communicate it, the better advocate that you're going to be for yourself and for your babies. That's like the biggest
Mm,
thing. Yeah.
mm, And perhaps it's just like a perfect note to end on. There has been so many incredible messages you've shared throughout, offering the gift of your story and talking about how you've navigated this, that, and the other thing, and your man, you know, and thank you to him as well for allowing you to share a bit of his story. Yeah. So, oh my goodness. Thank you so much for this. It's been amazing, and such a vulnerable share.
Yeah. Yeah.
Such a vulnerable share.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think those, you know, those are the most important
Yeah.
shares, because if you don't see your own story reflected in other people, it can make you feel really alone, and it can invoke like a lot of shame. That's what happened with me. And you know, shame, things that you have shame over, they hide in the dark, right? And they have so much power over you. So I think it is really important to share your stories and be vulnerable, and be, you know, radically honest about it, even, you know, if even if it might make you look bad in a certain light or good in a certain light, it doesn't matter. I think people just take away what they need from it, and then they leave the rest, you know. I think that's a really important piece of it.
Yeah. 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 There is so much healing for the person who's sharing often their story. There's so much healing for them, including in the gift that they're giving to others, when you know you've been in a situation where you've felt really isolated and alone and full of shame and guilt and struggle, because you think that nobody would understand you, and nobody gets you, and nobody else goes through this. It's an incredibly isolating experience, right? So there's the gift of the healing that can come through sharing your story and knowing that you're offering something to others that you didn't have much access to yourself. And just like spreading your story like this, there are going to be so many people who can relate to different elements of your story, and who can have some light for themselves, some tools, some, you know, there's hope and inspiration.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for making the time to chat to me. I'm really grateful. And yeah, I think the thing I forgot to say, which I think is kind of important, is that I actually finally did get diagnosed with postnatal depression, but after I had Hugo. And then I realized I'd been depressed that whole time. but then it wasn't depression, it was actually the cPTSD. But I did join like a I can't remember who runs it, but I did find a group that we met every week, and it was with other women who had postnatal depression too. And that was amazing. That was so good. Even just because the women there, they just held your baby for a little while. Like, that was actually so good, and it was free and it was accessible. So
Beautiful.
reaching out, for help like that was nice.
Yeah. If you remember the name of it, let me know and I'll put it
I
in
will.
And you still live down the east coast
Yeah,
there?
still live in Napier. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Still live in Napier.
I'm
Yeah.
actually doing my next podcast and a podcast interview next week with Alexa.
No, we should have had the podcast. She's amazing, mate. You already know Alexa.
I don't know Alexa well. Yeah.
There's honestly no way that I could have had that incredible birth with Hugo without her. Like, she was so incredible. She's just so tuned in, man. She is a sweetheart.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, you have a beautiful rest of your day, and yeah, we'll
Thank you
catch
so
you
much.
soon. Thank you for your beautiful sharing today.
Okay, thanks you. All right, see you later. Bye.